It also means unsatisfactoriness, which is a much wider term and embraces everything we experience, even the most pleasant things, which we experience as unsatisfactory because of their impermanence. The unsatisfactoriness of our thinking process becomes very, very clear during meditation, because we actually want to concentrate and yet here we are sitting and thinking.
We gain insight into impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self through personal experience. Nobody knows these three unless they have seen them for themselves. They are very nice words, which most of you may be familiar with, but you need to realize them through direct inner knowledge. Although we experience them every single moment, we're not usually paying enough attention. We are also dying every single moment, but we don't pay attention to that either. It takes precise mindfulness, which we are trying to learn through the meditation process. Look carefully and see the unsatisfactoriness of the thinking process as its inherent quality.
We can all experience reality, the way things really are, if we expand our awareness to the point where we can actually see it. We are experiencing exactly what the Buddha talked about, but we have to penetrate its meaning. It's no use sitting there and thinking, I wish I weren't thinking, or I wish I could concentrate, or I wish it weren't so difficult, or I wish my right leg wouldn't hurt so much. Those are dreams. Those are hopes. We can't afford to dream and hope if we want to get to the bottom of what ails us. The Buddha said that we are all sick and that the Dhamma is the medicine. He was sometimes called the great physician. But just as with any medicine, it is of no use just knowing about it or merely reading the label. Reading the label is what's been done for so many thousands of years now. Let's stop reading the label and swallow the pill. It's not so difficult once we know the difference.
When unpleasant feelings arise from sitting in one position, the mind immediately rejects and resists that. The mind immediately says, I don't like it. This is most unpleasant. I'm not going to last 10 days. I need a chair, or why sit like this? It's silly, or it's not worth it. Meditation can't be worth all this discomfort, or whatever else the mind tries to tell us. It has the ability to tell us anything. It can talk about any subject and it can see any side of the subject. It's an accepted debating technique to talk first about the advantages of a subject and then turn around and debate its contrary aspects. Any mind can do it. Our minds can slip this way and that.
Don't sit there and think, I don't like this, my right leg, or my back, or my neck, or whatever it may be, is very uncomfortable. No. Use the arising of feeling as another way to insight. Feeling is our basis for living. The way we react comes through the contact we make through our senses. We see, we hear, we taste, we smell, we touch, and, of course, we also think. The Buddha talked about the mind, the thinking process, as the sixth sense. We also sometimes refer to our thoughts as the objects of a sixth sense. If we were blind, for instance, the world would appear differently to us. If we were deaf, our world would be different again. The same holds with all the other senses. But here we have all our senses intact, we are making contact through them and from that contact come feelings. That cannot be helped. We can't help but make contact. An arahant also has feelings, three kinds, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Everybody has them. The neutral ones are those we are not aware of because we're not attentive enough. We haven't gotten enough mindfulness yet. But we are certainly aware of the pleasant feelings and we revel in them and try to devise ways and means of keeping them. The whole economy of this globe of ours is geared toward creating pleasant feelings and making people want more of them. If everybody were to reject this, most of the economy would collapse. Pleasant feelings are induced by fans, refrigerators, hot water, cold water, different kinds of food, better mattresses, and all the rest of it.
Feelings, everybody has them, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. They arise in quick succession. Most people spend their life trying to hold on to the pleasant feelings and get rid of the unpleasant ones. We are fighting a lost cause. It's impossible. Nobody can keep the pleasant feelings. Nobody can permanently get rid of the unpleasant ones. As one gets older, as some of you may have noticed, the body has more unpleasant feelings than it used to have. Nobody is exempt. It's the law of nature. Death is certain and very often connected with very unpleasant feelings. But these unpleasant feelings are not confined to old age and death. The youngest, strongest people have unpleasant physical feelings and unpleasant emotional feelings.
If we resolve to keep still for a moment, finally to take a look, to no longer run away from the unpleasant and no longer grasp at the pleasant. Maybe for just one meditation session, we will have learned an enormous amount about ourselves. Watching the unpleasant feelings that arise while sitting, and for most people this happens, is another way to insight into one's own reactions. One wants to change the feeling, wants to get away from it. There is a spontaneous, impetuous reaction to the unpleasant feeling by moving to get rid of it as quickly as possible. In daily living, we try to get rid of unpleasant feelings by getting rid of the people who trigger them in us, by trying to get rid of situations, by blaming others instead of looking at the feeling and saying, "So, it has arisen. It will stay a while and it will pass again." Nothing remains the same. If I watch it closely enough, I'm using mindfulness rather than reaction.
This reaction of ours, trying to keep the pleasant and trying to get rid of the unpleasant, is the reason for our continual roaming around the realm of birth and death, because there's no direction to it. It's a circular movement. We can't get out that way. It is a merry-go-round. It doesn't have a doorway. We go around and around and around trying to keep the pleasant, trying to get rid of the unpleasant, a never-ending circle. The only opening leading out of that merry-go-round is to look at the feeling and not to react. If we learn that in meditation, even for one moment, we can repeat it in daily living to great advantage. Everybody has some unpleasant experiences in his or her life. People say things we don't want to hear. People do things we don't want them to do. People don't appreciate us, love us, praise us. People go away when we want them to stay. People stay when we would like them to go away. It happens to everyone. The Buddha himself was abused. The Buddha experienced situations that created unpleasant feelings, but he didn't react.
There is only attention to the feeling. So when an unpleasant feeling arises in the body because of sitting still for longer than usual, don't blame anything or anyone. There's no one to blame for the feelings that arise. These are just feelings that arise and cease. Watch the feeling and know. Unless you stand back and look at an unpleasant feeling and not dislike it, you will never be able to effect a change. It has to be done once somewhere along the line. This is the ideal situation, to know that the unpleasant feelings are just feelings. They don't need to be owned because they weren't invited by us. We didn't ask for them. Why do we think they are ours?
Unless we realize what is going on in our mind, when these feelings arise, we will fall into our old established habit patterns over and over again. What we think constantly, what we react to over and over again makes grooves in the mind. Like a muddy driveway on which the car goes back and forth, and the ruts get deeper and deeper, the same thing happens in our mind. The ruts get deeper and deeper until in the end they become so deep it seems impossible to move out of the ruts and to go forward. Here is the right situation, here is an occasion, an opportunity to look at the reaction in one's mind toward unpleasant feelings. Don't rationalize, "It's bad for me, my blood circulation, I shouldn't do it," the doctor always says, nothing like that. Just watch the reaction in the mind. The mind is clever and manipulative. It can do anything. We call it a magician, which is a good word for it. It can pull a rabbit out of any hat. It can rationalize to the point where we are always right and everybody else is wrong.
This is something we must learn through meditation, that it is impossible to be absolutely right. Most of the time all we are doing is defending a viewpoint, which is based on our own ego. Because we have this ego, the delusion, all our viewpoints, all our opinions are colored by that. They can't be anything else. It's impossible. If there is a red tinge on the window, everything on the outside looks red. When we get to know our mind and its reactions through the meditative process, we can be more accepting of the fact that while we're thinking one thing, 4 billion other people are thinking something else. How could it be possible that we are right and the other 4 billion are wrong? We are defending a viewpoint, which may at times have validity, but only to the point where it relates to ourselves. The only one who can be totally, completely right is an arahant, who does not have the ego delusion.
All these steps are ways to gain insight, to be used not while the mind stays on the breath but while it is reacting to feelings or thinking. Every moment can be used to gain insight, and from that calm arises. A bit of insight creates a bit of calm. When we see that we don't need to pay any attention to our thoughts, it becomes easier to drop them. When we see that we don't have to react to feelings, it is much easier to drop the reaction. A bit of calm also creates a bit of insight, and both have to be used. The teaching of the Buddha goes against the current of our own instincts and is not easy to understand. The mind that can grasp it is a mind that has been trained. Ordinary minds usually argue about it, it's just another pastime, it doesn't have any results. To actually experience inside oneself what the Buddha talked about needs a mind that has become calmer and more concentrated than usual, and has seen itself for what it is, just arising and passing phenomena.
All this can happen while sitting here and trying to watch the breath. Calm and insight. Insight is the goal. Calm is the means. As long as there is no calm in the mind, there are waves of like and dislike. The waves obscure our vision. One cannot see one's likeness in a pond in which waves are rising high. The water has to become smooth and calm. Likewise, the mind has to become smooth and calm, then the vision that arises is clear. We can see with clarity and penetration.
Walking meditation is going in exactly the same direction. As we really become mindful and stay on the movement, calm arises. If the thinking process is there, we use it in order to know what goes on in our mind. The labeling is another way to know what one's mind is doing, and if we can label in meditation, we can label in daily living. Any person of goodwill would drop a thought labeled greed or hate. This is the way to purification. Calmness of the mind is dependent upon purification. Purification arises also through insight, through knowing oneself. Labeling shows us what is going on in the mind. In meditation, all labels, all thoughts need to be dropped. In daily living, it is the unprofitable, unskillful thoughts that have to go. Once we learn to do that, purification can take place. The path of purification leads to the end of all suffering.